it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Billy's monster. Samantha couldn't see what her son was pointing at. Her son, Billy, could see something standing on the side of the road beneath the dark trees, and it was smiling at him. Samantha and her son were trapped on a lonely, long country road. It was in the twilight of night, and a full moon projected a ghostly glow across the night sky. A faulty engine turned Samantha's night into a nightmare. Samantha's car sat on the side of the road. No matter how many times she would twist the ignition switch, her brand new 1984 Cadillac Cimarron refused to make a sound. Samantha's only hope was a phone booth. The phone booth seemed out of place, sitting on the other side of the country road. Samantha needed 20 cents to use the payphone. The good part was that Samantha had the change to pay for a call. The bad part was that Samantha was a little afraid to get out of her car because of what her son had told her. "Baby, there's nothing over there," Samantha kept telling her little boy repeatedly through a nervous giggle. The young mother knew her son had a vivid imagination. Sometimes she would adore her son's imaginary friends, but her son's new imaginary friend gave Samantha the chills. It first started at the movie theater. Samantha took her son to see The Terminator. She tried to enjoy the movie with her little boy, but she couldn't enjoy anything after her son started telling her about a skeletal man sitting behind her. Billy told his mum that his new imaginary friend followed them out of the movie theater. He then told his mum that his imaginary friend looked like the skeleton of a dead man. Billy thought maybe his imaginary friend was someone who died long ago. The little boy told his mother that he'd run alongside his mum's car at full speed before it broke down. He said his imaginary friend wore a midnight black bowler hat, and that the rest of the skeletal body was naked. The child described the imaginary friend as a lanky, dark figure that had a perpetual smile because he had no lips. He had no eyeballs either, or a nose. Billy told his mum that his imaginary friend's bones would rattle even while he was standing perfectly still. Most mums would freak out if their child gave them such a horrid description of their imaginary friend. But Samantha was a brave mum, or at least she tried to be brave. She didn't believe her little boy. She didn't want to believe him. It unnerved Samantha to see how her little boy's description of this imaginary friend was so detailed. Well, her son's earnest explanation of the existence of this person, this thing, unnerved Samantha as well. She also didn't like the name of her son's make-believe friend. "Dr. Rumples thinks you're pretty," Billy told his mum through a giggle. "He said you look like a cheerleader. Oh, he likes your long blonde hair and your ivory skin. He likes the dimples in your cheeks. He says you have the face of a queen. And he likes how your crystal blue hoop earrings match the color of your eyes." Billy spoke softly while reaching out and stroking his little fingers through his mum's honey blonde hair. The little boy could see the alarm in his mother's eyes, and he tried to relax her by caressing her face. Samantha took her son's hands away from her hair, and she brought his hand to her lips, kissing his fingers. "What are you thinking about, Mama?" Billy asked through his cute, unguarded voice. The little boy looked like a spitting image of his mother. He had her intense, crystal blue eyes and her dimples. His wavy golden blonde hair touched his shoulders, and it cradled his angelic face. Strangers would admire Billy's cute face, and the strangers were mostly women. Well, Billy hated it because sometimes people would mistake him for a girl. The only one he enjoyed hearing compliments from was his mother. "Oh, your imaginary friend sounds so evil. I don't want nothing evil around my baby," Samantha whispered through a smirk while brushing her pink, polished fingernails through her son's hair. The young woman laid a kiss on her son's forehead, and she thought about playing along with her child's imaginary friend game. But a voice in the back of her mind was telling her not to do that. "Oh, Dr. Rumples isn't evil, Mama. He looks scary, but he's a good person," Billy explained. The The boy rubbed his nose while thinking about what Dr. Rumples had told him. Your imaginary friend told you he was a good person. Samantha watched as her son immediately nodded his head to her question. Well, he told me he's not mean like Freddy Krueger. He told me he likes humans. Billy wasn't trying to scare his mom with his earnest belief in his friend. He wanted his mom to believe him. He wanted her to see what he could see. Dr. Rumples is real, Mama. He's standing right over there watching us. Billy pointed past his mother again, wanting her to see his friend standing on the other side of the road near the dark trees. Samantha took a deep breath, and she paid no attention to her child's little finger pointing past her face. Instead, the young woman kept her gaze on her son's face. She shook her head and smiled while touching the tip of her son's nose. He's right over there, Billy said as he continued to point past his mum. An urgent spark was in the child's voice. No matter how hard he tried, he could not get his mother to turn her head, which frustrated him. The little boy watched as his mother lowered his finger away from her face, and he pouted when he could see the disbelief in his mom's eyes. Billy looked away from his mother while rolling his eyes. He sat back in his seat, folding his arms and staring down at his lap. Every time little Billy would pout, he'd push his glasses up on his nose. Billy ignored his mother's fingers caressing his skin, and he frowned even more when he heard his mother snickering at him. You're crazier than me, and your daddy. Samantha giggled out her words, and she adored the little scowl on her son's face. You know your father had a cool imagination like you. That's what made him an outstanding scriptwriter. I was lucky to have your father. Oh, who would have thought that a Hollywood scriptwriter would be attracted to a nurse? He was smarter than me, like you, Samantha stated. The mother affectionately studied her son, and she disregarded his soft pouting. Samantha thought about how her son looked like a miniature version of her husband. He also dressed like his dad. He wore a blue jean vest, along with matching denim shorts. He wore a black t-shirt beneath his tiny vest. Samantha laughed in her mind while realizing that her son's clothes were just like her husband's, just 5 times smaller. The one piece of clothing that Timothy wore that belonged to his father was a black Run DMC baseball cap that he wore backward on his head. Billy would wear his father's hip-hop cap every time he'd go out in public. Like his father, he adored the hip-hop group Run DMC, and wearing the black cap made Billy feel like his father had never died. I miss Dad, Billy mumbled to his mother. The little boy thought about the last place where he'd seen his dad, which was in a hospital bed. I know, baby. I miss him too, Samantha said while still caressing her son's face. The young woman didn't want to reflect on her husband's death, but it was hard not to. Your dad was a sweetheart, and he was so intelligent, like you. Samantha glanced down at her wedding ring, which she had never removed from her finger after her husband's passing. Oh, I think about your dad every day. Oh, I would give anything to bring him back. Your mummy thought God hated her after I found out that your dad had brain cancer. I kept praying to God every day, asking him to take your daddy's cancer away. And he didn't. There was a bitter undertone in Samantha's voice. Billy turned to look at his mom again. But Dad's in heaven with God. That's what you told me at Daddy's funeral. Billy's voice and his words were like the cooing of a dove. His voice soothed his mom, and so did his touch. The little boy sensed his mother's sadness, and he didn't want her to cry like the last time she brought up Dad's cancer. Billy returned the caress that his mother had given him. The child would occasionally look past his mum to see Dr. Rumples. The child saw that the creature was still standing on the other side of the road, using the darkness to conceal his crooked physique. Yeah, Daddy's in heaven, sweetie, Samantha affirmed what she'd told her son in the past. The young woman's tender voice trailed off, and it became quiet inside her car for a little while. The only noise inside the car was the faint music coming from the radio. Prince's Party Like It's 1999 transmitted through the car's radio at a low volume. The radio was the only thing working in Samantha's Cadillac. It irritated the young woman because her sedan was only a month old and yet it had engine problems. Samantha held her son's hand while staring out her window at the phone booth across the road. She sighed as she made her plan to get out of the car and make her way toward the payphone. She knew she couldn't keep sitting in the car waiting for a passerby. She had to call for a tow truck, and she had the change in her purse to use the phone. Samantha felt stupid for sitting in her car for 30 minutes, waiting for a motorist to come down a lonely road in the middle of the night. At first, Samantha was about to step out of her car, but her hand froze on the door handle when her son said this. "He waved at you." Billy giggled as he brought up Dr. Rumples again. Samantha slowly looked around at her son. "Who waved at me, baby? Are you talking about Dr. Rumples again?" Samantha released an incredulous giggle. She hoped that her child would lay his vibrant imagination to rest for now. Samantha thought about how she tormented her parents with her imaginary friends when she was a little girl. The young mother figured that she was reaping what she sowed. Samantha's imaginary friend wasn't scary like her son's. A beautiful princess was her imaginary friend, and Samantha didn't understand why her son's imaginary friend sounded more like a monstrous foe. "Yeah, Dr. Rumples waved at you. He's still standing across from us. He can't stand up straight because of his back. It's crooked. He has crooked fingers too, like tree branches." Billy went into a deeper explanation for his imaginary friend's grotesque appearance. The little boy could see the disbelief arising in his mother's eyes again. He was determined to get his mother to believe him. "Your imaginary friend's scaring Mommy," Samantha said to her son through a half-whisper and a suppressed giggle. She wanted her son to stop with the Dr. Rumples situation, but she didn't want to crush her child's imagination or what she thought was his imagination. The voice in Samantha's head told her not to engage her son in the Dr. Rumples game, but the young mother ignored the voice because, she loved her son. She decided to play along with Billy, pretending that she could see Dr. Rumples standing on the other side of the road as well. She felt that encouraging her son's imagination as a mother was the right thing to do, even if her child's imagination was starting to scare her. "You can see him?" Billy sat up in the seat, and his voice squeaked a little from excitement after he watched his mom wave at Dr. Rumples. "Yeah, I can see your friend. You know something? He's not that scary looking." Samantha snickered, and she felt good engaging her son. "Well, he is tall, and I can see how crooked his back is. Poor thing, it must be hard for him to walk. Maybe he has arthritis." Samantha thought her playful words would cause her son to giggle with glee. But she looked around at her little Billy when he became eerily silent. "What's the matter, dollface? Why aren't you happy? You should be glad that Mummy can see your friend. I couldn't see him at first, but now I can see him waving." "Just stop it, Mama." Billy cut his mother off sharply. The little boy folded his arms again while retreating into his pouting state. Samantha laughed uncomfortably while looking shocked and partly guilty. "What's the matter with you? I see your friend and now you're mad at me?" Samantha kept a smirk on her face while staring at her son in disbelief. "You don't see him. You're just messing with me, and Dr. Rumples said you shouldn't lie to your son." Billy's voice had an edge to it. It was an unnatural edge that didn't belong in her little boy's voice. Samantha heard the edge in her son's voice, and she did not like it. "Okay, that's enough with Dr. Rumples. Mommy tried to play with you, but I'm not going to play if you're going to have a nasty attitude." Samantha went back into disciplinarian mode. She wanted to feel guilty, but she thought it would be absurd to feel guilty for trying to please her child. "I'm going to go make a phone call. You sit tight, okay?" Samantha leaned in, kissing her child on the side of his head and ignoring his pouting. Once again, Samantha reached for the door handle, but the hairs on her neck stood up when her son grabbed her knee. His little palm had moved like lightning. "Dr. Rumples wants you to stay in the car," Billy whispered, never looking at his mother. The little boy kept his eyes on his lap, but his hand was locked on his mother's knee. "Baby, you're scaring me. It's not cute anymore." Samantha's voice quivered. The mother was about to say something else, but for some reason her tongue froze when her son spoke again. "Dr. Rumpel said a truck will be here soon, so stay in the car." Billy never lost that edge in his voice. He continued, "Dr. Rumpel knows that you don't believe in him, so he wants you to play a quick game. It'll only take a second." Billy finally looked around at his mother, and his hand was caressing her knee. "Okay, fine. One quick game and that's it." Samantha tried to hide the quiver in her voice, and she tried to maintain an authoritative tone. That voice in Samantha's head was yelling at her now, telling her not to engage her son, but she ignored it once again. Billy licked his lips before speaking again. "Dr. Rumpels wants you to think of a number between 1 and 10. He's going to tell you the number you're thinking about by tapping on the roof of the car." Billy told his mother the rules of the game, and as he spoke, he never blinked while gazing into his mother's eyes. Samantha sighed while trying to hide her nervousness. She did what her son told her, and she thought of a number. A half smirk grew on Samantha's lips when she thought about how ridiculous the whole situation was becoming. She assumed nothing would happen. Her rational adult mind kept telling her that her son had a wild imagination. Samantha waited to hear something. She was playing her child's game once again, and she thought nothing of it, until she heard the first thud on the car's roof. "What the?" Samantha blurted out while looking up. Before she could tell herself that she'd heard a figment of her imagination, the second thud came, and it sent a paralyzing chill through Samantha's body. After a minute passed, a third thud came. Another minute, and then a fourth thud. Another minute, and then a fifth thud. Within 4 minutes, Samantha heard 6 hard thuds on the roof of her stranded Cadillac. The young woman didn't want to believe what she just heard, but she had heard it. It didn't matter if she wanted to believe it or not. What she heard was real. Samantha engaged her car's automatic door locks. She could still hear it moving around on the roof of her car. For a few minutes, Samantha swore she was dreaming. The young woman grabbed her child's hand when she heard the sound of clawing above her head. "Don't be afraid of him, Mama," Billy told his mum through a calm whisper. The little boy felt bad for his mum when he saw the sheer terror growing on her face. Baby." Those were the only 2 words Samantha could get out to her son before her voice locked. The heavy mass that crawled up on the roof caused Samantha's car to shift from side to side. Out of panic, Samantha locked her trembling fingers on the keys that still hung from the ignition switch. She kept turning the switch, praying for her car to start, but the Cadillac remained dead silent. Samantha kept turning the switch, knowing that her car wouldn't start. The young woman felt a dreadful shadow come over her while listening to the knocking and clawing sounds on her roof. The voice in Samantha's head told her that the thing on the roof of her car was going to kill her and her son if she didn't do something. A crazy thought came to her. She thought about grabbing her son and jumping out of the car, thinking maybe she could outrun the creature on foot. Samantha froze again when she heard the thing jump down off the roof of the car. She could hear mumbling and grunting coming from the rear. Billy never took his bright and gentle eyes off of his mum's face. The little boy had no fear of his friend. He could hear the creature pulling on the rear door handle behind the passenger seat. It warmed his heart when Dr. Rumpels tried to get into the car. He wanted to unlock the door so his friend could crawl in and join him and his mum. He giggled while listening to the frustrated grunting coming from outside the rear door behind him. Samantha prayed under her breath while closing her eyes, hoping to wake up from her dream at any time. The young mother didn't want to believe what was happening. She refused to believe that what was happening to her was horrifyingly real. Samantha thought that maybe she was hallucinating. She thought maybe the food server slipped PCP into the soda pop she bought for her and her son at the movie theater. She had a thought that maybe someone had laced their popcorn. Samantha let out a short scream when she heard clawing against the inside of her car where her son was sitting. The clawing was still coming from the back seat outside the locked rear door. Samantha almost turned to see what was lurking outside her rear window, but the voice in her head told her not to. She could hear it mumbling to itself and tugging on the door handle like a madman. Dr. Rumples would soon be in the car with Samantha and her son. The creature would soon be in the back seat, reaching out to touch Samantha. The young woman saw the creature smashing the rear window, and now was the time for Samantha to grab her son and make her escape. She did not want to meet Dr. Rumples, even though he was her child's friend, who she had assumed was imaginary. Dr. Rumples might have liked her son, but she feared that Dr. Rumples wouldn't like her very much. It seemed hopeless, until Samantha looked into her side mirror to see a spark of hope coming down the long, dark road. It was a truck. Samantha thought about what her son had told her. He told her a truck would come. When she saw the headlights of the pickup truck, the violent tugging on the rear door handle abruptly stopped. Dr. Rumples was gone, and Samantha breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that help was on the way. "Come on, baby." She let out a gasp between her words while reaching over and grabbing her son. The young woman bolted out of her car with her son cradled in one arm and her other arm waving down the truck. Samantha stood in the middle of the road, letting the truck's headlights bathe over her body. She wanted to make damn sure that the truck didn't miss her. Samantha only saw the truck's headlights, and she didn't want to imagine Dr. Rumples standing on the shoulder of the road, watching her from behind the darkness. She wanted the truck to move faster. She kept seeing the creature lunging out into the road and grabbing her and her son. While flagging down the truck, she briefly cut her eyes over to her car and saw that something had knocked 6 dents into her roof. Finally, the truck had arrived. For Samantha, seeing the headlights was like seeing a light from heaven. The young woman wasted no time as she ran up to the driver's side window of the truck to see who her hero was. "You need some help, pretty lady?" A beefy-looking young man with a thick beard and a mullet spoke to Samantha through a Texas drawl. "Yeah, my car broke down and we need a ride to the nearest service station." Samantha's words flew out of her mouth. Before the man could tell Samantha to get in the truck, she was already at his passenger door. The young woman stepped into the truck's cabin with her bare, slender arm securely holding her child. Samantha jumped into the man's truck so fast that she left one of her high-heel shoes behind on the road. Billy couldn't help thinking about Dr. Rumples. The little boy preferred to stay in his mother's car. He didn't like riding in a stranger's pickup truck. Billy was sitting close to his mom near the truck's passenger door. He paid no attention to his mother's kiss against the side of his head and her caressing fingers breezing through his hair. "Where are you folks coming from?" The man broke the silence inside his truck with his question to Samantha. "We came from Fort Worth. We went to see a movie there and we visited my husband's mother." Samantha still seemed visibly shaken by something, and the man could hear the stress in her voice. "My name's Russell Levi. It's nice to meet you." Russell stuck out his thick hand, and he let out a brief chuckle when Samantha timidly shook his hand using her fingers. "Oh, sorry about my hands. I know they look a little dirty. I'm a mechanic. When you work on cars for a living, it shows on your hands." Russell spoke proudly. "Didn't get your name, pretty lady. What's your son's name? He's a cute little fella," Russell exclaimed as he briefly glanced over at Billy, giving the boy a crooked little grin. Billy sheepishly smiled back at the man. He clutched his mother's waist even tighter. The little boy didn't like the smell inside the man's truck. The truck's interior reeked of motor oil, beer, and cigarette smoke. The combination of the foul odors twisted Billy's stomach. The one thing that stopped the child from being completely ill was thinking about his imaginary friend. "My name's Samantha Blair, and this is my son, Billy," Samantha told the stranger while fixing her hair and keeping her one arm wrapped around her son. After introducing herself and her son, Samantha closed her eyes for a second while taking a deep breath. The young woman tried to calm her nerves. She didn't want to think about what had happened a minute ago. Once again, Samantha's rational adult mind told her that the creature that clawed and banged on her car was a bear. Telling herself that it was a grizzly bear was the only way Samantha could deal with the shock of it all. But there was one problem in Samantha's rational explanation. Bears don't grunt, and they don't mumble like a man. Samantha couldn't stop thinking about the mumbling and the grunting she'd heard. The young woman tried to put it out of her mind, but she couldn't. Well, at least Samantha was safe. At least she was with a stranger who could help her and her son. "You seem frightened about something. What happened back there?" Russell asked. The man's Texas accent intensified his question. "My car broke down. It's brand new, but something happened with the engine, and it just died on me," Samantha explained. "I wanted to call for a tow truck, but I was too afraid to get out of my car." I know that sounds stupid. Samantha laughed softly, which surprised her. This meant that she was calming down. "I can understand how you feel, being a young woman out late at night. You're with your little boy, and you're out here in the dark." Russell paused and snorted. "We always associate danger with darkness. I can understand why a pretty little lady like you wouldn't want to get out of your car. You never know what's watching you in the dark." Russell's grumbly voice shifted the air around Samantha and her son. Samantha felt the man's bass-heavy voice vibrating her chest. Looking at Russell, Samantha could see that he was a hard-working man. He wore a dingy white trucker hat with an American flag design on the front of it. He had on a grey wife-beater shirt that hugged his bulky physique. Samantha saw an Air Force Army tattoo on his bulging bare arm. She noticed the mud stains on his ripped blue jeans. "When I saw you in the front of my truck, I thought you were that pop singer Madonna." Russell chuckled at his own words. He would occasionally put his eyes on Samantha's black miniskirt, and he saw how the skirt decorated her wide hips and her shapely legs. What turned Russell on the most was seeing her fishnet stockings. "Yeah, I kind of dress like Madonna." Samantha joined Russell in laughter. Every time Samantha would laugh softly, she would feel the tension seeping out of her body, like air leaking out of a balloon. "My husband would tease me and call me a material girl," Samantha continued. You dress like her. You got on that nice, lacy, revealing top and that sleeveless black leather jacket. Oh, I love your pink headband. It complements that long, flowing, beautiful blonde hair of yours." Russell paused again and snorted. I think you're prettier than Madonna. You're dressed like her, but your face and your body are way sexier. Your boobs are way bigger than hers, and your hips are hot." Russell's tongue ran loose. He didn't see his words as inappropriate. The Army veteran spoke his mind to Samantha, and he could feel forbidden desires stirring inside him, mostly inside his jeans. Thank you." Samantha didn't know what else to say to Russell's uncensored compliments. The young woman had felt safe a few minutes earlier. "Did you say you were a mechanic?" Samantha asked while closing her leather jacket to hide her lacy top. Yeah, I'm a mechanic." Russell's voice turned icy when he could somehow sense Samantha's uncomfortable feeling toward him. "Taking you to my garage, and I'll send my boys back to pick up your car." Russell gave Samantha the details of his plan. "You and your little boy are in excellent hands. We'll take care of you guys." After Russell said that to Samantha, he violently twisted his steering wheel, causing his 4x4 to make a sharp turn down an alleyway. Billy paid no mind to the truck's sudden swerve. The child was busy looking through the side mirror at a creature that was running behind the truck, keeping its pace at a mile-long distance. The darkness camouflaged the creature as it ran and leapt along the side of the dirt road. Billy couldn't take his eyes off Dr. Rumples. It amazed him how fast the skeletal man could move. Samantha had both arms around her little boy. She held his body tight against her chest. While the young woman was sitting between Russell and her child, she could sense something wasn't right when she watched Russell drive up into an auto repair service station that looked abandoned. Tall weeds surrounded the garage, and the parking lot looked more like a forest preserve. The service garage was dark, and its dilapidated structure looked more ancient than the Roman Colosseum. "Is this your garage?" Samantha asked after she watched Russell bring his truck to a stop. She felt chilled again when Russell didn't answer her question. Instead, the man turned and looked at her, taking off his trucker hat and revealing that he had a mohawk connected to his mullet. Samantha took her eyes off Russell when she saw a group of men appear out of nowhere. The men had shotguns and they surrounded the truck. Samantha counted 10 men altogether, and she didn't like the rock-hard scowls on the men's rugged faces. "Mama!" Billy shouted when one man jerked open the truck's passenger door before aiming his shotgun at the child and his mother. Samantha screamed when the man reached into the truck to grab her son. The woman swung her fist at the man and her knuckles connected with his nose. Unfortunately, Samantha could only land one punch on the man. She couldn't hold on to her son because of Russell grabbing her from behind and putting her in a headlock. "Come on, pretty lady," Russell whispered before dragging Samantha out of his truck's cabin by her neck. He even chuckled a little when Samantha began swinging her arms and flailing her legs. Russell mocked the young woman's effort to break free from him. "What are you doing?" Samantha's shrieking voice shot up to the night sky. The young woman kept trying to reach behind her to see if she could scratch Russell's face. Hearing her little boy screaming on the other side of the truck made Samantha go into a conniption. She screamed like a raging cat while digging her long fingernails into Russell's forehead. Samantha knew that she'd done some damage after Russell hurled her to the ground before grabbing his bleeding forehead. "What the hell's going on over there?" a man shouted as he marched toward Russell. The man was bigger than Russell, and his dirty plaid shirt barely covered his oversized belly. He had a beard that covered half of his face, and it looked like a wild and frizzy raccoon. When the man saw what Samantha had done to Russell's forehead, he unhesitatingly kicked Samantha in her stomach while she was struggling to get up from the ground. "That's my brother you injured, you stupid little bitch." The man roared down at Samantha before spewing tobacco out of his mouth. Most of the man's tobacco juice never made it to the ground. Instead, it landed at the bottom of his beard. "Don't kill her yet," Russell barked at his older brother, named Dennis. "We still need her for the sacrifice. Our master gave us direct orders." Russell grabbed his brother by the collar. "When you do the devil's work, you do it right." Dennis slapped his brother's hands away from his collar. "I know what we're supposed to do." A spitting growl came out of Dennis. Samantha was still coughing hard while grabbing her stomach. She crawled across the ground while praying to God that her ribs weren't broken. Tears stung her eyes when she could hear her little Billy screaming for help a few feet away from her. Samantha had to stop crawling on her hands and knees when all 10 of the men surrounded her. One of the men had Billy in his arms. He stopped Billy from screaming by knocking the child unconscious. Samantha released a wild cry as she swung her hand at the man who held her little boy. She could see that her child's lip was busted and that his glasses were missing. Samantha ignored her throbbing stomach, and she leaped up from the ground, attempting to get her son back, but she was restrained by the other men. Samantha wanted to attack the man after she'd seen her child, and her rage fell over her, and the woman screamed at every man who had his hands on her body. "Hot damn, she's a fiery little thing," one man shouted with enthusiasm. "She's beautiful. I can't wait to do her. I know we have to tie her down first, though." another man announced. The man who was holding Billy pulled out a knife. "We have to sacrifice her to the Dark One first, and we can have sex with her," the man instructed through a calm tone of voice. The man was dressed like a Catholic priest. His long clergyman cassock was blacker than the night sky. Unlike the other men, he was clean-shaven, and shades of grey peppered his dark, thin-cut hair. The man had a slender build that showed beneath his black robe, and from the way he carried himself, you could easily perceive him as the leader of the men. Samantha wanted to fall to her knees in tears, but the men held her up so high that her feet weren't even touching the ground. She knew that she would die painfully. But what she cared about the most was saving her little Billy. Samantha's heart collapsed when she saw the priest man pull out the knife. "She has a child, which means we have to sacrifice the boy first," the priest man stated to his men. "I'll cut his throat, and I want one of you fellas to catch the child's blood using the goblet." The priest man held up a silver goblet, which he proudly handed to Russell, and he patted Russell on the shoulder. "You did a good job, son. You captured another beautiful woman, and you captured her son as well. Out of all the women we've sacrificed, they've never had a child that we could sacrifice to our Dark Lord. Oh, the Dark One is pleased with you." After giving praise to Russell, the priest man brought his knife to Billy's throat. He paused when Samantha screamed at him, begging him not to kill her son. "No," Samantha shrieked. "Please don't kill my baby. Kill me instead." Samantha sobbed when she could see that her desperate pleading wasn't getting through to the priest man. She could see the robotic, lifeless stare that the priest man was giving her. "I'm sorry, honey, but your son must die first. These are the orders from the Prince of Darkness." The priest man dismissively spoke to Samantha before placing his knife on Billy's throat. But Samantha just kept screaming at the man. Oh, she almost lost it until she heard a screeching roar fill the night air. The roar alarmed the men. Even the priest man dropped his knife when he heard the otherworldly roar. "What the hell was that?" One man shouted out this question, but before he could say another word, something grabbed him from behind. It terrified the man that he couldn't see what was grabbing him. He tried to fight what was attacking him, but it easily overpowered his strength. Within a second, it had silenced the man screaming by decapitating him. The other men became so terrified that they took out running. Some men escaped while others weren't so fortunate. Russell and his brother Dennis were among the less fortunate men. Russell died after he'd seen his intestines lying on the ground. His brother cried for help after he felt a clawed hand dig into his back. Dennis lost his life after the creature ripped his spinal cord from his body, along with his skull. Samantha found herself back on the ground, lying on her hands and knees. She watched as a tall, naked skeletal man wearing a dark bowler hat ripped up men's bodies like they were pieces of paper. Sprinkles of blood rained down on Samantha's face, causing the young woman to flinch. Samantha finally saw Dr. Rumples. He towered over all the men, even the biggest man in the group. Oh, he was ugly, and to Samantha he looked like a mummified giant who had a head that looked too small for his body. She saw that he had no lips, no nose, or eyes. His face was a twisted, bony structure that formed a ghastly, perpetual smile. The two caves he had for eyes were blacker than the deepness of space. Samantha only saw bone and sinew, no muscle or a single inch of skin. She saw Dr. Rumple's long, gnarly fingers. They looked abnormally stretched and contorted, like thick, twisted vines. And Samantha saw what Dr. Rumples' fingers could do to the human body. She watched body parts fly in every direction. She almost got hit in the face by a piece of a man's arm. The last man to die was the priest man. Instead of running, he foolishly stood his ground. He had the nerve to confront the creature. At first, the priest man thought he was staring up at the devil, and he didn't understand why Satan would destroy the men who worked for him. The priest man opened his mouth to say something to the naked creature, but before he could utter a single word, he felt gnarled fingers reaching down into his throat. The priest man died instantly after Dr. Rumples brought one of the man's lungs up through his mouth. The force of the pull split the man's throat in half. The creature also severed the priest man's aortic artery, along with his beating heart. Samantha's body trembled as she remained on her knees, staring up at Dr. Rumples. She couldn't scream when she saw the giant skeleton slowly kneel to pick up her son. All Samantha could do was watch as Dr. Rumples cradled her 6-year-old son in his arms. Samantha thought the monster was going to kill her son and then kill her. But the opposite happened. While standing up, Samantha let out a gasp when Dr. Rumples mumbled and grunted at her before creeping toward her. The young woman's mouth fell open when the creature stood over her before slowly placing Billy in her arms. Billy opened his eyes and he moaned, feeling disoriented. The little boy raised his head from his mother's shoulder to see Dr. Rumples kissing his mum on her forehead. Billy smiled when Dr. Rumples kissed him on the forehead as well. He felt comforted by the monster's kiss, and he loved feeling those gnarled fingers stroking through his curly hair. Samantha finally took her eyes off Dr. Rumples to see that her son was awake. She rubbed and kissed on her son's face, while wondering if she was going to wake up. Samantha had to face the fact that she wasn't dreaming. She held her son tight in her arms, and she could feel her heart racing. Samantha stood perfectly still. She looked up again, putting her wide eyes on Dr. Rumples after her son whispered in her ear, "See, Mama, I told you Dr. Rumples was real." So there you go. Any story that has Madonna and Prince in it is okay by me. Off to a pretty good start with just those two. But, well, like that old school cool, set in the early 80s. A little young to remember it that well, but I was around, running around as a little child. Anyway, enough of this nonsense. What did you think of that one? Really like that story. Get your comeuppance in the end, didn't you naughty buggers? And what's wrong with an imaginary friend every now and then? Especially one that can kick ass like that, eh? Well, that's it from me. Will I be back again tomorrow night? I might just be. Tell me what you think. Would you like a story for a Thursday evening? If so, then let me know in the comments section below this video, along with any thoughts and feelings about this story. Well enough for one evening. My dear friends, I'll be back again very, very soon. Until then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.